John Dewey and the Art of Teaching, Toward Reflective and Imaginative Practice, by Douglas J. Simpson, Michael J. B. Jackson, and Judy C. Aycock. Chapter 6, The Teacher as Gardener, presented by Rachel Gluzband, Ketti Muschler, and Meghan Murray.
When was the last time you grew some tomatoes, planted a tree, fertilized your lawn, or watered your houseplants? Recently, we hope.
John Dewey has groundbreaking theories on the practice of education based on the belief that every student should be studied in his or her natural surroundings. He uses the metaphor of the teacher as gardener as a way to illustrate each individual's importance as a part of the greater whole. Essentially, Dewey's theory is that context matters. No matter what situation you're in, your environment will always be essential. Some of these environments are the classroom, the social environment, and the student-to-teacher relationship.
3 of Dewey's key beliefs, as presented in Chapter 6, relating the teacher to a gardener, are: Number 1, the student's native capacities are the starting point of educational gardening and growing. Number 2, the educational environment is the means of developing native capacities. And number 3, the educator is able to provide the educational environment to nourish the student's native abilities. The authors of our textbook also include a 4th goal, which reads, the unending goal of education is growth. Indeed, education is seen as growth, and growth is seen as education.
Dewey says that the curriculum needs to be adapted to the student's developmental stage or growth level, which is influenced by both her psychological maturation and social enculturation. Certain things grow in certain places. Even the best of farmers in Florida wouldn't succeed in growing pumpkin vines because that particular classroom is not suited to the pumpkin's needs. Every educational plan is a process participated in by both the student and the teacher. Everyone contributes. It takes both the gentle coaxing of the farmer and the innate capabilities of the seed to make a garden grow. Despite the necessity of the social process, it is also imperative that the learning remains student-centered.
Learning needs to focus on the student in context. It's not just about the classroom, teacher, or individual student, and it's not just the one patch of dirt where the plant is growing. We must examine the entire garden and anything that's around it. Teachers need to understand students as individuals, not characterize them by age level or cultural norms. As Joan Wink says in her textbook, "I've never heard of a standard child." The gardener must pay attention to each individual seedling. According to Dewey, each student is an active learner and compelled by her own desires and impulses. Quote, "This study of students is much like a gardener's painstaking examination of the visible response of different kinds of flowers to sunlight and shade, heat and cold, drought and rain, and manufactured nutrients and natural ingredients. If we want healthy, flourishing, growing flowers and students, we must understand them and how they are influenced by and respond to the activities and events of the environment."
What are we up to now, 3 or 4?
Dewey speaks of understanding the student by studying her in the context of where she lives, not studying her in the classroom, although he thinks doing this is also important. Their world consists of much more than what happens in the classroom. You need to know what's on their iPod, not just what they're singing in choir. Dewey also encourages the teacher to push him or herself beyond the stated curriculum into a real educational relationship with each child.
The 4th and paraphrased key belief of this chapter is, quote, the unending goal of education is growth. Therefore, though the student's original instincts are an important and necessary foundation, like the roots of education, they shouldn't dictate everything the teacher does. This does not promote growth. Students need to grow outside of themselves. That's why Dewey pushes a social environment, so a student's natural instincts can grow, flourish, and be shaped by the entire garden. Quote, the teacher should bring to the student an idea, ideal, or possibility not yet realized. Therefore, the potential and power and possibility belong to the student, but we, the teachers, hold the pruners.
Plants go through a specific process to grow from seedlings into flowers. They need to be actively engaged in this process to make it happen. There are certain things seeds need: sunlight, shade, water, the right wind conditions, and a little bit of love.
All of these things are educational resources that should be found in a healthy classroom as well as a healthy garden. Some students need more personal attention, some need more structured activities, some seek out creativity, and maybe some just need some time to put down their roots. No two children are the same.
Dewey says that the primary condition of growth is immaturity. Everyone has to have a little bit of immaturity before growth can occur. That being said, just because a child is little doesn't mean they're an incompetent adult. Even the littlest child has just as much potential as any adult ever could.
This is where the metaphor seems to fall apart. We don't really consider plants to be social. And what if a little marigold's greatest hope and dream is to grow up to be a tomato? Fortunately, Dewey goes on to say that teachers, quote, should believe in directed growth rather than natural development. As student-centered as his philosophy is, teachers still hold some control over the pruning of the garden. As for plants being social, Dewey responds by reminding us that, quote, the finest native stock would come to an untimely end or give a miserable product if its own energies could not interact with favorable atmospheric conditions. No matter how much potential a student has, they will never fully grow without influence from their teachers and their peers.
Dewey's metaphor relates directly to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. According to Vygotsky, there is a range between what a student can learn individually and what a student can learn with the guidance of their teacher or with their peers. The best teaching will challenge students with activities that fall within their zone of proximal development. Dewey utilizes the same concept by using fences in his metaphor.
We use fences and trellises to guide our plants and help them to grow to their fullest potential without falling or breaking.
Since farming has become such a huge industry today, we have to mass produce our plants a lot of times so we can help with food crises, etc. So many plants have actually become homogenized today as we hybrid them to make them bigger and better. That's why you should never treat one student exactly the same as the other, because they have different needs. And you should never try to turn one student into a former masterpiece.
Here at Westminster Choir College, we say that critical pedagogy advocates a shift in the power structure of classrooms. John Dewey does the same thing, but in a slightly different way. Through all of his treatises on every subject, John Dewey's ultimate goal is the establishment of egalitarian socialist democracy. He recognizes that schools ultimately function to educate or control the youngest citizens and shape the future of all societies. Therefore, in his works on education, he outlines his ideals for a free socialist society within the context of the classroom. Basically, he says that teaching should not be totalitarianism.
In his book, Democracy in Education, Dewey puts particular stress on the aims of education. In a stereotypical classroom, the aim of a lesson would be forcing the students to process and recite the items on a curriculum, achieved mostly through banking. However, Dewey calls these rigid and fixed and remote from the students' lives. Instead, he suggests that the true aim is one that makes classroom activities both intelligent and relevant. If students can't use what we're teaching, they will simply forget. Teachers must move with purpose.
One of his main metaphors for educational aims is that of a bumblebee. So, he imagines that there are grains of sand blowing around in the wind in the desert. All the grains are going places in the wind, and some of them are actually traveling really far. But they don't have any particular destination in mind, because they're not conscious of their process as they're going. Bumblebees, however, do have a particular destination in mind, because they're buzzing around the garden, collecting pollen to return into the hive to make honey and their house.
No matter which metaphor you use, the ultimate aim of education is growth. When enough individuals are altered, society will change, which provides the context and sows the seeds necessary for continued growth.
This has been a Can't Be Charmed production.